Recorded Books and RB Digital present Infinity Wars. Edited by Jonathan Strahan. Narrated by Ali Ahn and Neil Shah. Introduction. Jonathan Strahan. Welcome to Infinity Wars, the sixth book in the Infinity Project. The Infinity Project started in 2011 with the simple idea of asking some of the best writers working in science fiction and fantasy today to revisit some of its core ideas and themes in refreshing new ways. As the title Infinity Wars might suggest, this time we're looking at the future of war itself, something that has been a part of science fiction since its earliest days. The way Western society looks at war and warfare has changed so significantly over the past century or so that in some ways it has rendered how people felt about war at the beginning of the 20th century alien to a modern reader. I remember reading accounts of the Great War of 1914 to 1919 when I was at university and being struck by the eagerness, the need to enlist and to serve Queen and country, to be a part of the war where young men, mostly, lied about their age so they wouldn't miss out. It was a reflection of the time when war and conflict still had an aura of excitement and opportunity, and that excitement was combined with a deep sense of commitment to the institutions of society. While new military technology had led to a terrible number of deaths during the U.S. Civil War, it was only during the Great War that fact was really brought home on a personal and visceral level outside the U.S. as troops died in staggering numbers in the trenches of Europe. Projections of war in science fiction of the time had focused on airships and submarines and the like. With books like George Griffith's The Angel of the Revolution, 1893, and Olga Romanoff, 1894, telling rather fanciful stories of new military adventure without any real substantive change to the view of how wars were fought. Michael Moorcock would go on to parody this type of adventure in his 1970s novels The Warlord of the Air and The Land Leviathan. This changed during the period between the Great War and World War II, with new military science fiction taking a distinctly apocalyptic stance, seeing war as more likely to end civilization than anything else. This doomsday vision of warfare in fiction deepened after the Second World War. The technology developed and deployed during the war, large-scale air forces, nuclear weapons, rocketry, and so on, made it clear that doomsday was not only possible, but likely. The belief that war was justifiable or survivable was strongly tested, and post-World War II science fiction shared those doubts. The pulp era was in full swing. Space opera was the fiction of the day, and conflict was intergalactic in scale, and devastation was theatrical and overblown. You need only look back to A.E. Van Vogt's Black Destroyer and the War Against the Rull, the work of E.E. Doc Smith, the work of Eric Frank Russell, and even Paul and Kornbluth's Gunnercade, as by Cyril Judd, to see that. But even in amongst the overblown theatre of space opera, there were doubts. Robert A. Heinlein, we were always going to get to him, spent most of the 1950s writing a series of popular juvenile SF novels, many of which dealt with life and work in our solar system. He capped the decade with one of his most enduring works, Starship Troopers. The Korean War had filled the early part of the decade, stumbling to its never-ending pause in 1953, and it affected how writers saw the future of war. The intervention of troops from the United Nations was a new type of military act.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?